Hey, Aaron Rabinowitz here for Red Giant TV. I'm always watching tutorials, and recently, through tutorials, I found the work of motion graphics artist VinhSon Nguyen. As soon as I saw his stuff, I asked if he could do something cool for Red Giant TV, and he was graciously happy to oblige. So, in this episode, VinhSon will get his feet wet with Red Giant TV and show us how to create this underwater scene with watery text treatment. Take it away, VinhSon.
Hey everyone, VinhSon here. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to recreate this underwater ocean scene within After Effects. So as you can see in the preview, it's a really nice and organic animation, awesome motion graphics. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the tutorial and take a look at how to recreate this. So in After Effects, go ahead and create a new composition. And we're going to call this underwater. Mine's going to be 720p at 15 seconds long. Of course, yours will vary depending on what you need it for. Hit OK. So now we have a blank composition. Let's go ahead and create a new solid layer. Hit Control Command Y. We're going to call this BG. Make comp size. And hit OK. Just so we have a nice background layer to avoid any unwanted transparency or blending mode options. So now that we have our solid layer created, let's go ahead and take a look at how to create the underwater ocean surface right here. So for this effect, we're going to be using trap code form. So go ahead and create another new solid. We're going to call this water. And hit OK. And let's go ahead and bring in form into here. So search in form under trap code. And drag in form onto our water solid layer. And right now we have 3 grids of particles. Let's go ahead and go into the base form. And change the number of particles in Z to 1. Just so we have one flat grid of particles. And we also want to rotate this grid of particles. So let's go ahead and go to the X rotation. And change the X rotation to -90 degrees. We're just going to flip the grid so that we have a nice horizontal grid of particles. But as you can see, the problem is the particle grid is really too small. So we're going to need to increase the size in X and Y. So for the size in X, let's go ahead and increase the size to 1500. Just so we fill in the whole frame right here. And then change the size in Y to 2500. So now that we have our grid set up, let's go ahead and go down to the world transform. And we just want to move this thing up to the top of the frame, very similar to the original demonstration. So let's go ahead and go down to the world transform and go ahead and just decrease the Y offset into our grid of particles is at the very top of the surface of our composition right here. So about -120 is looking great for me. And let's go ahead and just start filling in the gaps of this grid right here. So right now we only have 70 particles in the X and Y direction. So let's go ahead and increase this number so we can just fill in the extra gaps. So for the particles in X, I'm going to change it to 600. And the particles in Y to 350. So now we kind of just filled in the little gaps of our grid right here. So now that we have our grid set up, let's go ahead and try to create the waves effect, as you can see here. We get these nice organic waves going on in our ocean. So let's go ahead and create those waves now. We're going to be using the displacement to create that nice wave. Now, you can use the displacement in form. I'm going to go ahead and create a displacement map or a layer to control the displacement for form separately. So let's go ahead and create a new composition. Composition, new composition. We're going to call this a displacement map. Same settings as before. We're going to hit OK. And let's go ahead and create another new solid. So Control Command Y, and we're going to call this one map. And for our map, we're going to be using the fractal noise effects. Primarily because its effect is very versatile, very powerful and easy to use, and it also gives really nice organic results. So right now our map is very static. We need to go ahead and animate this to give it a little bit more variation. So we have an option here called evolution, which allows us to kind of evolve the animation over time. So it kind of gives it that nice movement. So we want to animate this, and rather than keyframing it, let's go ahead and create a really quick expression. So by holding down Alt or Option, go ahead and click on the evolution stopwatch to bring up the expression controls. And let's go ahead and type in time asterisk 100. Which is going to multiply the composition time by 100 to control the evolution. So now, as you can see over time, our fractal noise is moving. And that's just going to give more variation and movement to our waves overall. So even though our waves is moving right now, it's not exactly moving in a direction that I want it to. It's kind of just uniformly moving around randomly. We want it to animate and make it seem as if we're traveling through the water or the surface of the ocean. Like this. So we can do that with a setting under the transform called offset turbulence. Now watch what happens when I pull the offset turbulence. You can see that now our fractal noise is animating in a certain direction. In this case, the Y direction. So we want to animate this with keyframes. So let's go to the beginning of the timeline. We're going to hit a stopwatch keyframe for the offset turbulence. We're going to move to the end of the composition. And we're going to change this value to 3500. So now over time, our fractal noise is evolving over time. And it's also moving down, which is going to give it that nice traveling effect that we have in the original demonstration here. So now that we have our map set up, I think we're ready to bring it into the underwater composition. So back into the project panel, we're going to bring our displacement map in. And we don't need to see it. We only need it as a reference layer so Form can know what to displace and what not to displace. So back into our water layer under Form, let's go into the displacement map. So layer maps, displacement. And for map over, we're going to select X and Y. And for our displacement layer, we're going to select our displacement map. So now the displacement map is telling Form what to displace and what not to displace. And let me just do a quick RAM preview real quick. So as you can see, we're starting to get the basic fluidity and motion and movement of the ocean water of the surface. But the problem is, it doesn't exactly look like water. We still have those grids of particles going on. And we can solve that problem by applying a vector blur, CC vector blur, to our form layer. Bring that in. And with the amount set to 50, kind of just blurs everything out. We're going to set the type to perpendicular. We're also going to change the ridge smoothness down to 0 and map softness to 20. And that's just going to blur the particles out so we don't get those individual grids of particles, and we have this kind of fluid visualization of form right here. So now we're really getting that nice fluid movement in our ocean water scene. And of course we can do some minor adjustments to this to make it look a little bit nicer. First off, I'm going to go down into the particles section of form and go ahead and change the particle to somewhat of a very light blue. And then we can apply trap code shine to this thing to give it those nice light rays we saw in the original demonstration here. So back into our underwater composition, let's go into shine and let's place the shine underneath the vector blur. And then we're going to pull up the source point so that the source point is very, very high up to kind of simulate light above the water. And then we're going to change the transfer mode from none to add. So it's going to add the colors into the existing colors right here. And then we're going to go to the colorize and change the shadows to a blue. And change the midtones to a very similar blue, except a lot lighter. Something like that. And then we can decrease the ray length a little bit and bring up the boost light. And then with that done, we can go ahead and go back into the particles tab of form. And then we can also make some minor adjustments to the color to kind of just blend in the colors a little bit nicer. Maybe something like that. And now we can start to apply some nice shading and lighting to our underwater ocean scene. So let's go ahead and create a new light. Layer, new light. And we're going to make it a point light. Make it a blue color. Hit OK. And right now the lights don't affect form at all because we don't have shading turned on. So back into the form layer, we can go under shading and turn on shading to on. So now you should see that our lights are starting to affect our ocean right here. I'm going to pull this one way back a little bit so it's very, very close to us to kind of light the front part of the ocean. And I'm just moving it in Z space. And then I'm going to duplicate the light by hitting Control Command D to duplicate it. And we're going to bring this one a little bit further back, just so we illuminate a good portion of the water right here. And that is looking absolutely fantastic to me. So now that we have the water set up, let's go ahead and take a look at how to recreate the floor. Now the floor is going to be very similar to how we recreated the displacement map for our water layer. So we can actually just go ahead and borrow that layer from our displacement map. So back into the displacement map composition, we can actually just copy this whole entire layer, hit Control Command C, go back into the underwater composition, and just paste it in there, Control Command V. We're going to make this thing a 3D layer, so go ahead and toggle your switches until you see the 3D cube, make it a 3D layer, and we're going to hit R on the keyboard to bring up the rotation, and just like the water, we're going to set the X rotation to -90 degrees, which is going to flip it horizontally. And then we're going to push down the floor layer on the Z space to kind of just bring it down here, run there, and then we're going to hit S on the keyboard to bring up the scale. We're going to uncheck scale proportions or constraint proportions, and then we're just going to make this thing a lot longer. So pull up the Y, I'd say about 350 or so, and just pull up the X to about 200. And then we can hit P on the keyboard, and we're kind of at the center of the floor right now, so let's go ahead and just push that back a little bit, something like that. So we're kind of cheating the movement right now. We're not actually moving. We don't have a camera moving, but with the floor layer and the ocean layer right here, it makes it seem like we're moving. And I'm going to make a few minor adjustments to the floor layer. Let's go ahead and rename the map to floor. And then we're going to go down to the transform. And then we're going to uncheck uniform scaling once again. And we're just going to bring up the height a little bit to maybe around 250. And again, the reason why we're using fractal noise is because it gives it a really nice terrain organic look. Really great for these kind of abstract things like this. And we're going to move the floor underneath our water layer so all the shine can kind of just hide the imperfections of our floor layer. Kind of blends in a little bit nicer. And of course, we're going to do some minor color correction. So go ahead and bring in the curves effect. Drag curves into our floor layer. And we're just going to darken this thing a lot. Give it a contrast boost. And then we can go into the blue channel. Make it a little more blue. Decrease the reds a little bit. And we're just going to bring up the greens. And we can just make this thing a little bit longer. And then of course adjust it. Something like that. Just so we had this nice long organic floor. And if I just RAM preview this real quick. So as you can see, our animation is really coming together now. We have our nice surface water, we have our volumetric lights, and we have the floor. Now the volumetric lights give a really nice illusion that we have a nice big large volumetric space. Now we can actually enhance this even more and kind of fill in the imperfections, hide the gaps, and kind of just fill in the rest of the frame by adding some nice environment elements such as smoke and particles. So I'm going to do that real quick by creating another new solid. Control Command Y. And we're going to call this particles. And we're just going to be creating those nice kind of air bubbles, kind of water bubbles in the water. And we're going to be using particular for this. Shortcut particular, drag that in. And into the emitter section right here, we want to reduce the number of particles. This is too much particles. So we're going to change the particles per second to 10. And then we're going to set the emitter type to box. So now our particles are emitting from a box rather than from a single point. And let's go ahead and just pull this thing way back in Z space. Kind of just drag it back to maybe about 3400. And then we can really increase the size in X. Make the space a little bit wider. So approximately 4000. And then we can change the emitter size in Z to about 200. Just so we have some more room going on. And we can go into the extra emissions to set the pre-run to 100. So it's going to start emitting already before the time starts. But unfortunately, you can see that the particles don't exactly make it to us or past us. So you want to give it that nice wind boost. So into the physics, we can go into air. And we want to decrease the wind in Z. So it's going to push the particles towards us, like you see in the preview right there. And we want to change the wind in Z to negative 2300. So as you can see now, our particles are actually making it to us. So now we can go ahead and go to the particles and tweak the settings. We're going to make it a light blue. And we're going to decrease the size to 3. And maybe a little bit too small. Just so we kind of have these subtle air bubbles going on. And right now, our particles are kind of moving at us in a linear way. Just moving straight at us. There's no air resistance. There's no water resistance. None of that turbulence going on. And we can add that turbulence by going into the turbulence field and form. And just changing the effect position to 10. And that's just kind of give the particles a kind of displacement path going on. So it's not just moving straight towards us in a very linear fashion. And of course, we can turn on the motion blur for the layer, as well as the composition, to kind of give it that more realistic motion blur. And we're going to drag the particles above our water. So one final thing, we're going to have to create the smoke. And the smoke is going to be using the same parameters pretty much as the particles right here. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the particles layer. We're going to call this smoke to kind of give it that nice atmosphere in the water, unclear atmosphere. And we can go down into the particles section and change the particle type from sphere to cloudlet. And we really want to pump up the size. So we want to pump the size to about 300. So they're very, very large. And then we can decrease the opacity to about 0.8. So now you start to see those kind of subtle particles of smoke. And to make it less obtrusive, we can change and tint the color to a more of a blue color, a more dark blue color, just to kind of blend everything in a little bit more. So right now our particles are just kind of coming on and they're just shutting off instantly. We want to change that. So into the opacity over life, we can select this kind of preset right here, and it's going to fade our particles in and fade our particles out. And we're also going to do the same thing for our smoke layer. So go to opacity over life and just select this preset so things nicely fade on and fade off. And then I'm going to just do another basic color correction. So create a new adjustment layer. We're going to call this CC for color correction. And we're just going to apply curves. Kind of nice contrast boost. And if you want, you can go ahead and tint the animation whatever you want, color grade it however you want. It's all up to you. So one last thing we're going to do is we're going to try to incorporate some text titles into this animation, just to kind of add some more use and some more purpose to this environment here. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and create a new text layer. So layer new text. And I'm going to type in my text. I'm going to call it underwater. And for the font, I'm going to use a free font, which you can get at defont.com. And I believe it's called Planet of the Apes right here. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit to around there. And let's go ahead and make this text black. And we're going to make a stroke and make the stroke kind of a nice blue color. Kind of matches the ocean. And then a stroke about 1 pixel is fine. And now we have our text. Now we need to start animating this thing. So let's go ahead and start at the very beginning of the timeline. And let's just make it a 3D layer. Hit the 3D knob switch right there. Hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position. And we're just going to pull it kind of back. Holding down Shift. Approximately 3000 pixels back in Z space. We're going to hit a stopwatch keyframe. And we're going to move about 1 second in. And we're going to set the value to 0 in the Z position. So it's going to stop right here. And we're just going to let it float around for a few seconds. And then hit a stopwatch. Move a few frames forward and just kind of push it back out. Past the camera. So approximately around negative 1800 or so. And of course, don't forget to turn on the motion blur. So things just kind of adds more realism, some nice blur to it. And just like that, we have our text. Now, again, similar to the particles underwater, this looks too perfect, this looks too smooth. We want to add some kind of displacement, turbulence to it. And we can do that by applying a turbulent displace under distort. We can drag this effect onto the text layer. And that's just going to add some simple displacement to the text, kind of make it look more organic and more liquefied in a way. So for the amount, we're going to just set it to 25 or so. And the size, we're going to keep it down to 50. So we kind of have this nice kind of water effect. And we want to go ahead and animate this. So let's go to the beginning of the timeline. Let's go ahead and set this back to 25. And just hit a stopwatch for the amount. And hit U on the keyboard to show all the keyframes. And we can simply move up to the next keyframe right here. Set this to 0. And then we can move to the next keyframe here. And I'm pressing the page up and page down keys to kind of navigate by frame in the timeline. I'm going to hit a stopwatch again for the amount. Move to the final keyframe. And we're going to set the amount back to 25. So things are going to be displaced when it comes in. And then as it comes to a stop, it's going to not be so displaced. And then when it comes out, it's going to be displaced again. And we want to ease these keyframes so they don't come to an abrupt stop. So right click and go to keyframe assistant and go to easy ease. So now things are just kind of smoothly come together. And one final thing we can do is we can add some opacity fade to this. So hit T on the keyboard to reveal the opacity for the layer. We're going to move to the beginning of the timeline once again. And we're going to go to the opacity and change the opacity down to 0. And hit a stopwatch keyframe. Hit U once again on the keyboard to show all the keyframes, and again we're going to duplicate the same process over again. At this point, when the text comes in, we're going to change the opacity to 100. We're going to copy this keyframe, Control Command C, and just paste it right here. Copy this keyframe, and just paste it at the end. So that way our text fades in and fades out, very similar to the turbulent displace. And again, we're going to ease these keyframe. Just go ahead and hit F9 or right click keyframe assistant and easy ease. So we just have our nice kind of text right here, and we can apply a nice subtle glow to this text to kind of bring out the stroke layer a little bit. And once again, you can just keep on duplicating these text layers and just make them pile up together, and it'll create some nice title sequences. So as you can see at this area right here, our text is remaining completely stale, completely static, and that's not moving at all. So we want to add some kind of variation to this. Now, you can do this with the camera, you can do this with some tracking. I'm going to go the tracking route because it's a lot easier, a lot faster. So let's go ahead and just bring down the toggle for the text. And under the animate play button here, we're going to go to the tracking at the very bottom. And this is going to bring up the tracking amount. And we can set a stopwatch for the beginning at 0. Again, hit U on the keyboard to show all the keyframes. And we're just going to move to the end right here. And maybe set the value to 10. And that's just going to add that subtle tracking movement to our text. And of course, we can kind of just crush in the time right here to make it a little bit faster. One quick final thing, at the beginning of the text layer doesn't seem displaced enough in my opinion, so we want to go ahead and displace it just a little bit more, so we can click on the first keyframe for the turbulence amount. We can change this to 60, and that's going to add a little more displacement to our text. And then we can do the same for the turbulent displace for the last keyframe to 60. And let's just do another quick RAM preview. So that's pretty much it, guys. We took a look at how to recreate the nice ocean surface. We took a look at how to recreate the floors, the nice volumetric atmosphere, as well as the light rays and the text. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video tutorial. Do not forget to try to experiment, play around with the whole thing. Maybe add your own flares to it, add your own tweaks, your own kind of visual effects to it. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video tutorial. And once again, guys, I'll see you guys in the next video tutorial.
Thanks, Vincent. Great stuff. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to learn more about Vincent and his work, check out his site at creativedojo.net. Don't forget, you can always download a free trial of any Red Giant products that Vincent used in this video at redgiantsoftware.com. And you can get tons of free presets for Red Giant plugins on redgiantpeople.com. Speaking of free, Vincent touched on some basic color correction techniques, and if you really want to get into that sort of thing, check out Colorista Free and LUT Buddy, 2 free color correction plugins that we're giving away for, oh yeah, free. You can find those at redgiantsoftware.com. Finally, I want to mention that if you're looking to keep up with what we're doing at Red Giant, whether it's a tutorial, contest, product release, or whatever, just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or on our blog. Once again, I'm Aaron Rabinowitz for Red Giant TV. See you next time.